Yeah, okay.
Okay, here we go.
Hi, everybody. This is Carrie Mills, live from my house, actually, for the Garden Jewish Community Center for our Tuesday talks. And this one is going to hit the nail on the head for so many people. Oh my gosh, just bringing back childhood memories and so much more. So I'm so excited. So we'll just jump right into it. But let me remind everybody, any questions or you want to start partaking in the conversation, please write something in the chat box on YouTube and we will get the question and we can ask it. So please participate. And I'm going to introduce our guest for today. So this is really exciting. We have Marisa Scheinfeld, who was born in Brooklyn, New York, and she gives a year in 1980, which is like way past when I was born, and raised in the Catskills. She received a BA from the State University at Albany in 2002 and an MFA from San Diego State University in 2011. Her work is motivated by an interest in the landscape and its embedded histories, both apparent and hidden. Marisa's photographic projects and books are among the collections of the Library of Congress, the New York Public Library, Yeshiva University Museum, the National Yiddish Book Center, the Magnus, I believe I pronounced that right, I hope, collection of Jewish art and life at UC Berkeley, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, the International Raoul Wallenberg Foundation, and the Edmund and Nancy K. Dubois Library at the Museum of Photographic Arts. On October 4th, 2016, Cornell University Press released her first book entitled The Borscht Belt, Revisiting the Remains of America's Jewish Vacation Land. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Marisa is currently a visiting assistant professor of photography at SUNY Purchase and working on her second book. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand it all over to Marisa today, and we are going to go on a journey. Here you go. Hi, Marisa.
Hi, thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you to the JCC for asking me to speak. I'm also live from my home, and I thank everyone for tuning in. I'm just going to share my screen so we can get started here. So the Borscht Belt. This book came out about 4 years ago, and I'm really thankful and humbled every time I am asked to speak about it. I always call it a labor of love about the land that I love. I grew up there. My family has roots there. They still do. And it was a 5-year endeavor that really pushed me to deep investigations, obviously about my hometown, but stemming from being a child, going back as an adult, exploring it, and as well as it being a contemporary view of a place rooted in the past, it really is an exploration and a larger fascination with many deeper rooted issues. And overall, it's a reflection about the passage of time. What we're going to do today is really time travel. That's what I love to call it. We're going to really kind of experience the rise and fall of the Catskills, its impact, and the contemporary, and what I always refer to as the luscious chaos that I found in its landscape. I'm going to start with a quote by Cartier-Bresson. Photographers deal in things which are continually vanishing, and when they have vanished, there is no contrivance on earth which can make them come back again. The Borscht Belt, located about 1,000 miles from Nashville, but 90 miles from New York City, is pretty much comprised of that red county, Sullivan County, but also included parts of Ulster and Orange County. Its proximity to New York City is really what allowed it to thrive as a vacation destination. It was known for so many things, but it was a kind of collecting point, a meeting point. I often call it a mecca for American Jews, roughly from the 1920s to the 1970s. And this is an image made in 1965 on Route 17, which takes you right into the heart of the Borscht Belt and some hotels of that time. The Browns, the Windsor, the Pines, the Aladdin, Gilbert's, the Majestic, the Grand View. I'm not sure looking at this right now that any of those hotels currently exist. And because of these kind of reasons of time passing and really all the changes that have happened, I think the book kind of embeds itself in this strange place, in this ever evolving landscape of Catskills history. But the Borscht Belt was known for being a year-round destination. It catered to American Jews looking for a place to go, to be social, to hang out, to forge relationships with others. Year after year, people sometimes went to the same hotels, the same bungalow colonies, and really just such a cherished moment in American Jewish history. This is the Imperial Room at the Concord. It seated over 3,000 people, and when it was built, it was the biggest showroom in the United States. This is the Stardust Room at the Nevele, another hotel of kind of equal weight and majesticness. And this is the Twizzle Stick Lounge at the Raleigh. One of the really important things about the way that I've always proceeded with my work and the way that I continue to is it's very heavy in research and investigation. I really wanted to understand why the Borscht Belt was, why it ceased, why so many years have passed since a reinvigoration or a revitalization of the county, have kind of been waiting, and really kind of digging into that all. But this is Sullivan County, New York, #1 in the nation for a zestful, restful vacation. The book has 3 essays, one that I wrote, and I remember sitting down to write the essay, and the first thing that popped into my mind is really one of the first paragraphs. It's, "I grew up in the mountains, or as others called it, the country, as if no other mountain or country existed any place else on earth." Because for me, and I think for a specific group of people, the Catskills and the Borscht Belt was the place to be. And this idea of it being the mountain, the country, just shows its prominence, its importance, its connection to memory and culture and time and place. And everything that I had heard about it, only living some of it, having worked as a lifeguard at the Concord when I was 16, all of the memories, the stories that I heard growing up as a child, as now as a 40-year-old woman, and continue to hear from so many people that have reached out to me about the book, is this word fun. Even those that worked the hotels that maybe didn't have fun at the time, look back at it with a real fondness. But I knew I needed to do my homework and really needed to understand everything about it. So I began looking at the earliest history of the county. The Lenape Indian tribe were really the earliest residents of the region, a peaceful hunter-gatherer tribe. Their homeland occupies present-day Pennsylvania, the Hudson Valley, the Catskills, New Jersey, and Long Island. What happened with the tribe is a story that we all know, a very darker moment of American history, but European and Dutch settlers came into America, and the rumored riches of the Catskills were something that was targeted. When I say riches, I don't mean money, I mean land and resources. And this is an early drawing of the Mongup Falls, predating photography, so made sometime in the 1700s, early 1800s. European settlers that came in were interested in the land. You have to think of a very rocky, mountainous, rugged landscape. It was pretty much inaccessible to the greater metropolitan New York City area. And what happened was the first industry. The Borscht Belt is the third. I know you're here for the Borscht Belt. But the first industry was the lumber industry. They cut down timber and trees and logged them down the Delaware River, and this lumber helped build up cities like New York City and Philadelphia. Once that industry died out, around the time of the Civil War, the second industry sprung up in Sullivan County, and this was the tanning industry. Leather goods were tanned during the Civil War. It's been said that Sullivan County tanned more goods and made more leather during the Civil War than any other county. And with the tannery came roadways, and also came the railroad. And slowly, a very desolate region began to be connected to New York City. And what starts to happen is this first kind of springboard of tourism with fishermen, lovers of nature, writers, and artists. And these are some early images of fly fishing at the Beaverkill River. And on the bottom is a very early hotel, the Beaverkill Inn. In addition, the region was a very great source of inspiration for early American landscape painting and painters alike. And this is Kindred Spirits by Asher Duran, made in 1849, and it depicts Catskill Falls, or the Catskills. The image has been studied and talked about countless times. It has many different objects and memento moris in it, but on the grander kind of surface, you see these two men contemplating the beauty of nature, everything that is in front of them, what they can understand, what they can't understand, and it's kind of magnificence. And that magnificence and that beauty is something that continues to draw people to the Catskills even today. Like most of the United States around this time, 1900, and this is the Kiamisha Casino, Sullivan County caught railroad fever. Boosted by the railroads, the tourism trade that began with fishermen and artists and writers really began to blossom. Once a desolate and industrial region, Sullivan County became a tourist destination. It offered visitors fresh air, clean water, local produce, and entertainment. This is a really early postcard, a little bit further north of the Borscht Belt, but nevertheless, the Catskills, the best place on earth. I love what it offers. Pretty girls, good hunting. My favorite is elves playing ninapins, which I've yet to see. Winter sports, bathing, freshwater fishing, old Rip Van Winkle. And this is a postcard from 1907. So what I started to do with my research is really piece together a visual timeline so I can start to see the buildup, starting with the early lumber industry to the tanning industry to these early tourism waves. And this allowed me to start putting together this timeline of the region. In addition to this early tourism wave, the region had many sanitaria. The idea was that people that were afflicted with tuberculosis could go to the sanitaria, and really in the mountains, the theory was that breathing fresh air would alleviate symptoms. But locals were not really pleased that the area was becoming known as a haven for the sick. And there was a lot of pressure on the sanitaria owners. And as a result, many closed down. The top is the Loomis, and it is still there in Liberty. And the bottom is the Workman's Circle, which is gone. In addition, during the 1920s, there was a pandemic. There was also a polio pandemic, and people were told to avoid large crowds. And as a result, a lot of that early tourism really kind of shuttered. People stopped going. But what you have now is a region that's very accessible, that has small hotels, some farms, and really becomes the backbone for why the Borscht Belt began. In the first half of the 20th century, discrimination against Jews was widespread. This is a magazine distributed in this country in 1908. It's called Jew Jokes. Anti-Semitism affected employment, social club membership, and vacation access. This is a pamphlet from the Craigsmore Inn, which is a beautiful little inn. It doesn't exist anymore, but the town is still there. It's above Ellenville, if you know what I'm talking about, on the Schwangunk mountain ridge. Really beautiful watercolor paper, lovely photographs. And if you look at the bottom center image, owning to neighborhood preferences, Hebrews are requested not to apply. And I've seen many documents, from brochures to letters stating someone with a quintessentially Jewish name, "Dear Mr. Silverberg, we do not employ your kind." And this level of hate and discrimination, unfortunately, continues today, but it is the reason why Jews decided to create their own place to go, place where they weren't discriminated against and judged. This is the Lennon Hotel and the railroad station in Liberty. Recognizing a growing Jewish immigrant population with a desire to experience an American lifestyle, but really were persecuted against it, Jewish investors and entrepreneurs in New York City began to purchase properties in the region, specifically small farms, boarding houses, and small hotels. This is Grossinger's, the original farmhouse in 1914. 1919 is the estimate of this photograph. Grossinger's, really, its slogan was "Grossinger's had everything." And it did. This is the original main building on the left and also the original staff on the right. Grossinger's had its own zip code. It had an airport. It had 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools, the one that you've seen here, as well as an indoor, outdoor ice skating rink, golf courses, movie theaters. You didn't have to leave. It truly had everything. This is an aerial view of the hotel. And I will talk about it later, but about 3 years ago, the hotel was completely demolished, and what you see here is no longer. This is the planning. And there was so much put in, so many architects of the day, so much energy and effort and thought for all of these hotels. The New York Times says that there were 538 hotels. I think there were actually more, and that there were 50,000 bungalows. And that's not colonies, just individual bungalow cabins in the Catskills in 1965. That number has obviously waxed and waned, but among those 538, here are some. The Hotel Zeiger, which when I found it was called the El Dorado. Oh, sorry, no, it was called the El Dorado, and I found it was called the Palms. It had reinvented it many times. These hotels competed against one another to have the better showrooms and food and theaters and acts. And here you start to see the beginnings of the Borscht Belt, really created because of the banning and the non-allowance of Jews to kind of experience a place for themselves in America. Greetings from Sullivan County. Distributed by Hillig Studios, who's someone I'm looking into now for my new book, a well-known anti-Semite who has a castle up in Liberty, New York. But let's get back to the Borscht Belt. This is Kutscher's place that I went to as a child, have a lot of love for. This is the Concord. This staircase was built by a man named Morris Lapidus. Morris Lapidus built a lot of the Concord Grossingers and also hotels in Miami Beach like the Fontainebleau. Many of these hotels, as well as the architecture and design that they imbued, really impacted cities like Las Vegas as well as Atlantic City. The Borscht Belt, with its all-inclusive, all-you-can-eat, was really a model for what the American vacation experience has been for quite some time, even though it has obviously changed in the last 10 months. Esther Manor, so there were 5-star, 4-star, 3-star hotels, kosher, semi-kosher, kind of kosher, not kosher. I found hotels that were catered to all different types of people from all walks of life and all interests, from hotels for Jewish cross-dressers to hotels for very religious people. This is the Olympic pool and poolorama at the Laurels. I once had the pleasure of meeting a man named Jack Levin, who was a manager at the Laurels, and he told me that the slogan was "Go to the Laurels and lose your morals." Like every hotel had its flavor, this was specifically for singles, this hotel. The Borscht Belt was known as a year-round vacation destination, mostly known for its summer. It's been glamorized in movies and TVs and shows for its warm air and breezes, but it also really flourished in the winter. And this is the new indoor pool and health club at the Laurels Hotel on Second Lake. This is Charles and Lillian Brown's hotel in the famous Jerry Lewis showroom, 1968 in Loch Sheldrake. And I will talk a little bit more about comedy and its huge legacy in the Borscht Belt shortly. This is Louis Simon Says Goldstein. He was what is called a tumbler. You can translate this into like an MC, someone that invigorates the crowd, gets everyone on their feet, and he was known for doing Simon Says. I was lucky to befriend his recently late wife, Jackie Horner, who was a dancer at Grossinger's, whose story helped the screenwriter write the movie Dirty Dancing. This is a dining room at Kutscher's. Photography has all these funny things, like a picture says 1,000 words, but this one does. And what I see here is a group of people seated around table 89. It's copious, full of all food that you can order. You could order 5 steaks, send them all back, 5 desserts, 10 entrees. It was a gluttonous experience. On the left, there's a girl kind of quietly looking on in her glasses, then moving clockwise as there's a gentleman blowing his nose. These two women are kind of passing, a piece of bread or something, and this man is about to choke, and then there's another man kind of engrossed in his food. And to me, this is what I envision as the quintessential Borscht Belt, loud, like the raging dining room. And although I had gone to Kutcher's as a kid, I never, was a guest. We always kind of snuck in. My grandfather was a card shark, so I have always heard about the food, and people either loved it or hated it. But it was and continues to be an experience that people talk about. So much so, here's the menu: the 3 different kinds of juice, 4 types of soup, 7 or 8 entrees, so many cold plates and desserts, and then of course on the right, the events. And each hotel produced a menu of its everyday offerings, from its food to its daytime to its nighttime events. They all had wonderful fonts and graphic designers and artists that were employed. And this is from the Nemerson Hotel, July 29th, 1969. This is the staff at Kutcher's. I think that there's so much to be said about the Borscht Belt and the lament of its passing. And while there is often a lot of kind of let's say sadness about the passing of this cherished, beautiful vacation industry. It's also important to think about all of the people that, were left behind when these hotels closed. And this is just the staff of the dining room. So many people, their livelihoods, their bills, their worlds were really centered around the hotels, living there to cater to the people that came to them. It's kind of impossible to talk about the Borscht Belt and all of its hotels without including a little bit about the bungalows, because there were 50,000 of them. So you have Slavin's bungalow, the finest in vacationing, its new filtered swimming pool, 10 minutes to the Empire State Music Festival, markets and activities, Wiss Wigwam in Ferndale, and Rosenberg's. And they always kind of advertise where they were close to. And this was the Tamarack Lodge, which was a big hotel. This is probably, I'd say, my favorite photograph that I found of a portrait, a found photograph showing these 4 women seated at a bungalow colony in Monticello in 1943. A lot of the images that I found all come off of the Catskills Institute archive, which is housed at Brown University. And it was began by Phil Brown, no relation, a historian. Phil has written many different books on the Catskills, was instrumental in my research. And you can go on the Catskills Institute website and type in a specific hotel or a name. And if it's there for a high res download. But I love this photograph. They're so elegant and beautiful. And I also love it for its composition. You just kind of look straight in a line, and in the back is that bungalow colony on this beautiful summer day. Of course, I dug into my own family archives. It was kind of important to connect all the dots for me. And on the left is my great-grandmother at a bungalow in Fallsburg. And on the right, that man kind of facing us, seated at the card table there, is my grandpa Benny. And this is a bungalow colony in Ellenville that he and my grandmother and mother and uncles went to for many, many years. And this is me, this is my proof. This is me at maybe age 7 or 8, and my grandpa Jack rowing on the lake at Kutcher's. And although I truly, never really experienced the Borscht Belt for what it really was, I was there to witness it in its last days in the 80s and 90s. And I think now more than ever, looking back and reminiscing on that time, the hotels really experienced a mere fraction of the foot traffic that they once did. I've heard stories of people slinking under gates at Kutcher's and the Concords to see acts like The Who and Jethro Tull and Janis Joplin and the Doors and the Grateful Dead. And, when I look back on those days, I think, like many people, I have a very full heart, even though it's bittersweet at times. This is a great piece of ephemera. This is the take it easy for the traveler or the visitor who's too busy having fun. So you just check off your feelings. So, dear sweetheart, I am lonely. The place here is rainy. I do lots of thinking of you. I need cash. That's a funny one. Business is perfect. I wish you would write oftener. Not really English, but great. And I miss you. I will be seeing you with love. And all different towns produce these postcards. They usually weren't embedded with an image, but an illustration. And this is from Swan Lake. Oh, Paul Newman, what a stud. So the celebrity impact of the Borscht Belt is something that carries over. You have Paul Newman, you have Eddie Fisher and Elizabeth Taylor, who caused quite a stir. He had married Elizabeth Taylor at Grossinger's, but also married his first wife there. You have Duke Ellington, Sammy Davis Jr., another image of Eddie Fisher, just kind of showing the crowds here. The Barry sisters, really wonderful acts, so many kind of musical acts, as well as dignitaries and huge political figures and prominent figures of the day. Dr. Martin Luther King at a rabbinical conference at the Concord, and Golda Meir, the Prime Minister of Israel, in the dining room of Grossinger's. The Borscht Belt also catered to sports, and it was a huge training ground for many different, specifically boxing. So you have Floyd Patterson, Rocky Marciano, Muhammad Ali, and on the left, on the bottom, is Wilt Chamberlain, who was a bellhop at Kutcher's. And all of these people have rose to just such kind of like epic, legendary fame. It's also impossible to talk about the Borscht Belt without mentioning its impact in comedy. It's said that the birthplace of stand-up comedy was the Borscht Belt, and that many of these faces tried and worked their worst and best jokes on the stages, from Sid Caesar to Woody Allen to Rodney Dangerfield, Freddie Roman. The ladies, Marilyn Michaels, Toady Fields, Henny Youngman, Mel Brooks, Jerry Seinfeld, who I remember seeing billboards for before he was even a household name, and the late, wonderful, great Joan Rivers, who spoke so wonderfully about the Borscht Belt and how really it kind of like helped her gain her footing. So many of these comedians really kind of just told their worst jokes. And Mel Brooks was gracious enough to give me a quote in the book, and in our correspondence, he told me he was fired from a Catskills hotel for not being funny enough. And really, I think the impact of comedy is where the Borscht Belt infiltrated American popular culture, because so many of these comedians graduated to television and movies. And that's really where, if one does not know anything about the Borscht Belt, its roots in comedy and its continued impact really is enduring. As we're moving through time, you can see we're now in the 1980s, and these are some images of the Pines Hotel in South Fallsburg. There was a wonderful photographer whose work was recently released by the Library of Congress, and you can go on their website and find his work. His name is John Margulies, a wonderful photographer driving around the United States in the 80s, really documenting Americana at that time. And this is Mr. and Mrs. Brown at his hotel. What I love about Margulies' work and what's so poignant about it is, besides the images of the Brown and a few images of portraits of people, he largely photographed kind of at this big turning point where the hotels were empty and there were not a lot of people compared to the grand filled showrooms of the 50s and 60s. But here we are in the late 70s. These are all headlines from the New York Times in 1995. I remember in 1995, I was 15 and I was a lifeguard at the Concord. And later that summer, we were told the hotel was going to close. And for a 15-year-old, it was a bummer to lose my job, but really the ripple of the economic fallout and the cultural fallout has lasted and continues to last. And these are some headlines that came out of that year. In Catskills, resort's death darkens the view. our towns a tradition and a resort at twilight, grocingers to remain closed during Passover, and hotel in Catskill sold to Brooklyn Company. And the last, the hills were alive with the sound of tumbling, a really kind of nod to the sound of music and also tumbling. I think I could be here for a long time talking about why the Borscht Belt failed. Some love to say it was airlines, air conditioning, the boom of the suburbs, the kind of cruise industry, and the fact that you can get on a boat and see 5 countries in 4 days, and how airline rates went down and now air travel was kind of open to all. There was also it's important to think about the era, 1960s, so many things going on, women's lib, sexual revolution, Woodstock, the war in Vietnam. Also, historians have pointed to 1965 being the year that Roosevelt signed the Anti-Discrimination Act. And when that act was signed, Jews, people of color, people who were previously banned from traveling across America and staying at its many hotels, dining at its establishments, were now free to go where they wanted. So I think that this, more than anything, is one of the many reasons why the Borscht Belt failed or ceased. It also did not keep up with the changing times, and there's many reasons. Nevertheless, it left behind such a legacy. And in addition to the book and the photographs and the research, I've also kind of amassed a huge collection of ephemera, from little photo picture viewers to matchbooks to stationery and ashtrays and paperweights. And these are all on view with the traveling exhibit. It was set to open at the New York State Museum this June. And obviously, because of the pandemic, it has been postponed. But the legacy, when people know nothing of the Borscht Belt, you can often say dirty dancing, which kind of encapsulates a specific moment in time at a hotel, A Walk on the Moon, which tells the story of the bungalows, Sweet Lorraine, a kind of like sleeper movie filmed at the Hide-In, and then Mr. Saturday Night with Billy Crystal. It's also been widely written about, from memoir to archival collection of image to interview. And of course, I knew about all of these things. And growing up there, hearing the stories, seeing everything and its impact really was what I knew. I guess when I started this project, I was at a loss for what to photograph. A lot of my previous work had a Jewish string running through it. I had done an extensive project on Holocaust survivors and photographed throughout Eastern Europe. And I was living in San Diego at the time, quite uninspired by its sunsets. And never really took myself as the type of photographer that was interested in sunsets. There was just some more meat that I was craving. And I received some advice, and it was 4 words. And those 4 words were really the impetus for the project. And it came from my mentor, Arthur Ullman. Arthur said, Marisa, when you don't know what to shoot, you shoot what you know. Shoot what you know. And that's really like the fire that was lit, and the obsessive kind of adventure that I went on for 5+ years. And I began with rephotography. Rephotography is something that photographers have been doing since the birth of the medium. It's the act of taking an image and kind of going back to the same place where that image was made. So shoot what you know, go to the source. Where are you from? What is your story? Can your story resonate, and will it? And if so, have it be you, and kind of be authentic, and be from your space and your heart. And this place is from my heart. So I went to the Laurels, found this postcard of the Laurels, and would go to the Laurels. And it was like I was on a treasure hunt. I had a postcard in hand, so many things, so much research that I had done to prepare. And this act of now and then was really what I was kind of focused on. Then I'd go and find another postcard, the indoor-outdoor skating rink at the Pines, and then go to the Pines. And it really was kind of a shell, if not a skeletal version of what I had seen in the image on the left. And I began doing this over and over. Rephotography is really fun. Like I said, it felt like a treasure map, but it was also frustrating because you have to find the same vantage point, the same angle. Often the photographer that made the postcard was on a ladder or on a building that formerly existed or something. And, I just kind of tried my best. There were a lot of failures, but when it was successful, it was really exciting. This is the Laurels Country Club, Sackett Lake, the indoor pool and health club. And this is it as I found it, that kind of lima bean shaped pool here. This process was really enlightening for me. It had me start to think about time, what changes, what stays the same, and everything that's sandwiched in between this idea of time that can operate obviously in this very linear format, but time can go backwards and forwards and sideways and parallel, and it can be experienced in so many different ways depending on our state of mind and being. And this was the project, this now and then. But I think what happened was is that I got distracted. And my distraction was because I realized that there was more of a story to tell than this now and then. So the book begins with this now and then idea, of this rephotographic concept, but then it jumps into the remains, and what remains, if you will. It's important to say that all of the places that I photographed were places that were abandoned. Out of 538 hotels at plus and 50,000 bungalows, many have been repurposed, turned into ashrams, meditation centers, rehabilitation centers, jails, prisons, new hotels. The hotels and bungalows that I photographed are indicated in blue for the hotels and gold for the bungalow colonies. I found about 50 different sites, and I call them sites because they were in various form, from singular disused driveway and pool in the middle of the woods to huge compound like Grossinger's when I photographed it. It was important to me to look at these hotels in a different way. They have long been looked at as behemoths, as these creatures of kind of monstrous proportions. They are symbols of failure and stagnation. And I knew that they would no longer be at some point. That kind of what is built will crumble, Rome will fall. And I wanted to kind of shed that final light on them. They're kind of their last show. So each hotel has a different circumstance of why it closed, when it closed, and what's going on with it. I'll try to talk about that as well as the photographs as photographs themselves. This is a photographic book. So the Pines closed in about 89. New owners have abandoned it. We're going to turn it into condos, and probably due to the many logistical, economic, as well as some environmental issues with the property, the hotel has since been abandoned. That house on the left there, that little red house, was where Mrs. Ehrlich lived. I don't believe she's around anymore, but I would knock on her door and park in her driveway, and she would allow me to scamper and run on the property. And when I found it, it was really overgrown, but those white circular mid-century modern globe ball lights I remember as a kid. And then they had this like dirt on them. And this idea of entropy was something that I saw everywhere. This sense of just abandonment, a place just being left discarded by us and left to time and Mother Nature and chance and weather and everything else that happens. Grossinger's closed in 89, was bankrupt many times and bailed out. In their bailout, they decided to build a new lobby and a new carport. And this is what you see. I found this disused driveway walking up, the unfinished carport, the lobby that I'll bring you into in a little while, and completely overgrown by nature. Grossinger's, after 30 years, was demolished with plans to be determined. Not really sure what's happening there. I try to keep abreast of things. This is the Tansville Hotel, and all that was left were these stairs. The Tansville was a huge hotel from what I've been told and from the research I found. And I thought these stairs were so strong, so mighty and glorious that they were the only thing that had survived the ravaging and the razing of the entire hotel, including the pool. And the pools are always harder to kind of raise because they have to be kind of dug out of the earth. But I thought that these stairs were so persistent and they had persevered. If you ever have the ability to go up to the Catskills and you take a drive on its many windy roads, you'll notice stone pillars lining many of the roads. These stone pillars were stairways or entranceways to previous hotels, bungalow colonies, and farms. This is an unknown bungalow colony in Liberty, New York, and a casino that was on the property. And this kind of sense of abandonment was everywhere. For me, I was really kind of just obsessed with just trying to find every remnant, every relic, every piece of the Borscht Belt that remained. And this was the Stardust Room at the Nevele. The Nevele also closed sometime in the early 2000s and had hopes to become a casino. I believe it's still for sale, but this beautiful, majestic gold lame curtain still hung, the same one that's hanging in the postcard, and the Nevele. This is another image of the Nevele. You can see kind of the coffee and the cappuccino and the espresso and kind of everything that was offered on this menu. And there tends to be like this powerful hold on American Jewish imagination that the Borscht Belt has. And there's a lot of tension and cultural resonance. This is a guest room at the Paramount. And all that was there were these two lights, these two little reading lights indicative of travel and kind of vacation. And I loved the texture on the wall and that old wallpaper and that gold kind of shininess. And you can even see me in the photograph in my hands, kind of holding my camera there at the Paramount Hotel in Parksville. This is the Tamarack Lodge, which burned in a fire. There's no museum dedicated to the Borscht Belt. There are hopeful plans that there is going to be one day. It is a big endeavor. There are no historical markers that dot the roadways showing where a hotel once was or bungalow colony once was. There is nothing. So while I was doing this project, I did get a lot of kind of kickback, like there's nothing there, no one's there, what are you photographing? And for a long time, I couldn't answer that question. I just felt compelled to photograph. And what I've realized is that images like this, an elevator shaft in a formerly burned out building, that elevator shaft was the only thing that survived. It sits like a totem pole, like a marker. We were here. We are still here. And all of the stories and the memories and the layers that are beneath the photographs, beneath the chaos and the disarray and the garbage strewn and the installation plummeting. This is Kutcher's when it was being demolished to become a yoga and meditation retreat that is not sure if it's open today, but it was open before the pandemic. Then I'd find this peculiar repurposing of places that were once intended for something had become useful for something else. In this case, the Black Magic showroom that was once a theater for comedy and music alike had been gutted and turned into a skate park and used by local kids. Growing up in the Catskills, my childhood, I loved it. And as I became a teenager and really the economic cultural fallout occurred, there was really nothing to do. Many things closed. And there was a real depression in the area. And it's easy, I think, to kind of say, wow, how kind of tragic and sad that this showroom has become a skate park. But I look at it like, wow, like how amazing and how purposeful have these local kids been to find a place and use it for their own form of entertainment. And I love the colors and the textures. And this is the dining room at the Pines. That pink, could not walk away from that beautiful hot pink, but really what it had become was a paintball battlefield, another, new purpose, new use for a space. I'm photographing with a medium format camera. I'm using film. I scan my negatives. I do very little manipulation to color, a little bit of burning and dodging. I am sort of part of that kind of very like traditional straight photographer. I don't set up things. I don't think that I think photography can be very misleading. And I think it can be very manipulative. And my religion with it is to not misuse that. So finding things like this are amazing. Who set up table 12 at the Homoac and put the napkins and spun them in the glasses and set up that table with fake fruit? Not really sure, but whoever did it, I love them. And it just created these like still lives for me that were all transpired or, by chance and by the invitation that I found at that day. And of course, so much tragedy and then finding a little bit of comedy there. This image of the bowling alley, to me, that bowling alley is more than a bowling ball. It's the earth. It's the blue earth, and how, the Borscht Belt is kind of was the center of the earth for so many people, and was their world, was the place they went where they created memory and told story and passed down generation to generation. And when I went back to this bowling alley, it was completely demolished. And of course, there's been a lot of trespassing besides myself, and these hotels have become a big problem for local law enforcement and the community at large. This greenhouse, finding it wild and untamed. This greenhouse at Grossinger's grew all of its herbs, or as many of its herbs as it could, and its vegetables. But finding it in this form, it was just as beautiful, I think, as it may have been when it was functioning as an actual greenhouse. Mother Nature is kind of really powerful, kind of always wins. This image of this fern coming out of the structure of a pool, to me, signaled, not just the passing of this Rosemont hotel, but a new life, something new emerging out of the remnants and the wreckage. The indoor pool at Grossinger's. This indoor pool was razed and completely demolished. And when things like that have happened, and I've kind of looked back at the project more and more, I know that the act of photographing is an act of preservation in itself. Why do we make photographs? To capture that moment, that slice of time, to hold them, to cherish them, to pass them on. And we think of ruins as places that we have to traipse to the Middle East and Tibet that are thousands of years old, but these are modern ruins in America. When I made this image, I knew it was going to be the cover of the book, showing the lawn chair and the moss, the layers of moss and grass that have grown up in this indoor pool. I kind of call it a vanished world, because that's what it really feels like. Basketball courts at Kutcher's on a really sunny day, the only thing that you can see are the tracks of animals that have been playing on the courts. But I love the blue sky and the red and the white, and how all the colors are coming together and contrasting with one another. This is an image that I feel kind of holds the past, present, and future together in one frame. And it's the type of image that I'm looking to make in the future. So the past is the Jenny G building, the kind of matriarch of Grossinger's, and she had her own wing named after her. And this is one of the rooms in the Jenny G building. That room had become a sanctuary for birds, many different birds living in that space that day. And I was able to capture one as it kind of flew past the window, a little bit scared from the sound of my shutter. And that was the present. And the future is this little plant growing up out of the ashes of a fire on the floor. And here you have, like in one image, the past, present, and future. This gold shoe, and a kind of muck, and really the smell was intense of time. It has a smell. It's like opening a page of an old library book. A phone off the hook. And again, that kind of passage of time and what it does to a place. I was interested in just probing beneath the surface. And even though the structures have been chiseled by time and man and woman and human and humanity, these objects of discard were really interesting. A prayer book that was open to this particular page and this passage. And this is another one of those images, the past, present, and future. The tamarack, which had burned in a fire, except for this wing. The past was the tamarack and all that it holds. The present is this unmade bed, and the phone off the hook. And the future is that kind of greenery, kind of shifting into that room. And I love how on the left is that green, and on the right, there's that pitch black. The project is, of course, about the Borscht Belt, but it's also about time. It's also about the cycle of life and the light and the dark that is in all of us and in everything. And again, I look at myself like an archaeologist, but unlike an archaeologist, I'm not interested in setting up scenes. And these are all scenes that I've found. The Nevele at Ellenville, that reflection, that landscape in the back of the mountains. This is the ice skating rink, which is still pretty beautiful and preserved. And I hope that they're able to kind of keep this and not knock down these historical structures. It has this beautiful kind of like pagoda-like shape to it. This is the Revolution Room at Breezy Corners. The day that I went there, it was being demolished. That sand pile in the back is the casino that had opened a few years ago. That casino had long been talked about as being the messiah that was going to save Sullivan County. And although I think it's great and it's provided a lot of jobs and a new interest in the region, there is so much that has been going on in the county, from small towns and hamlets being completely renovated and revitalized to new structures, new buildings, new businesses, and new lives being formed there. But the day I found it, it was being knocked down. And as serendipitous as it was, one of my friends from high school was on the demo crew. So I asked him and his boss if I could photograph, and they allowed me to do so. And that's really how the project kind of came together a lot of the times. I spent 5 years just kind of going there back and forth, and making friends, forging new friends, rekindling old friendships, speaking to strangers at gas stations, having them point something out to me, and then even going back to places that I went to as a kid, like this at the Concord. It was a complete rubble, and it felt like a tsunami or an earthquake had hit it. I also mentally felt like I had kind of been rocked, because I remember those pine trees, and that was all I could see. That was all I remembered, was the excitement of going to the hotel with my grandparents. And if you've been to the Concord, it had these pine trees that lined the driveway going in and out. And it was such an exciting experience to drive down and kind of see the hotel. So I had to include both, and kind of find myself in that place where I see part of the past and then also the present. This is just a further kind of up close view of the piles of the Concord. And I think this is the last image, the coffee shop at Grossinger's, devoid of the counter. I think it's really easy to just say that the book is sad, and there's clearly a pathos and a melancholy that runs through it. I look at it as an elegy, but I also, in the same breath, look at it as a celebration. I look at the Borch Belt as a place that continues to strike a chord, pull on the heartstrings, of many people who frequented it, many people who've heard the stories of it, and the many new people who are finding out about it as Sullivan County continues, even through this pandemic, to find its footing and to really usher in what I truly believe is going to be the fourth wave of an industry. We looked at the rise and fall and how time has kind of seen many ebbs and flows with the region, from the lumber industry to the tanning to the Borscht Belt, and really 50 years in the making to a new one. So I thank you for your time and for your eyes and for looking. And I hope that the project made you think about time, brought you back to a place maybe that you have memories, or maybe brings you somewhere that you have yet to explore. I'm going to end with a quote from a book by a writer and a photographer named Wright Morris. And it sums up everything I feel about this book so much that it's included in the book itself. In the dry places, men begin to dream. Where the rivers run sand, there is something in man that begins to flow. West of the 98th meridian, where sometimes it rains and sometimes it doesn't, towns like weeds spring up when it rains and dry up when it stops. But in a dry climate, the husk of the plant remains. The stranger might find, as if preserved in amber, something of the green life that was once lived there, and the ghosts of men who have gone on to a better place. The withered towns are empty, but not uninhabited. Faces sometimes peer out from the broken windows or whisper from the sagging balconies, as if this place, now that is dead, had come to life. As if empty, it is forever occupied. Wright Morris. The book has 129 photographs. It's a nice coffee table sized book. It has 3 essays. It's available via the many links on my website, from bookshop to independent booksellers, your local bookstore, and of course all of the other booksellers. Besides myself, there's an essay written by Stefan Canfer, who wrote a really great book on the Borscht Belt in the 80s, and Jenna Weissman Josselit, who's a historian and a professor, who writes such a witty and eloquent essay. And then, of course, the photographs. So again, I thank you so much for tuning in. I can be found on social media and via email. There's also a portal to share your memories on the website, and any talks or future events, and everything is on that site. So thank you all so very much. And I think if there's any questions, I'll hang out with Carrie and answer them. And again, thank you to the Gordon JCC for asking me to speak.
Well, that was really a beautiful, poetic presentation, and I so appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I always say that, like I made the book 4 years ago, and so much has happened in my life since then. I had a child, and just life itself and time passing. And a lot of times I feel so far away from the book, but when I talk about it, it's like I'm right there with it again. And, again, I'm grateful for any chance and opportunity to speak about it. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. We were speaking before we went on, when we went live, and I was just briefly telling you, I mean, I'm 22 years older than you, so I grew up there during the 60s. I was 12 years old, so 1960 is when we started, or maybe even 59, we started spending our summers up in the Catskills at Sedgwick's bungalow colony, and went to all the hotels and Manhattan Transfer. We'd see all these big groups that became really big groups. Later we'd come to our little bungalow colony on a Saturday night and perform. And so I thought of this while you were speaking. I have photographs. I come across them because I have all my grandmother's photographs and my mother's, and I've kept them as people have passed away in my family. And I'm wondering, I imagine there's so many other people who are watching this that might have photographs, or just at the end you mentioned a portal that people could speak about it, but is there a place, or maybe you mentioned also earlier it was the archives, where was that is there any place where people can send their photographs to historians who might be interested?
Yeah, so you can contact Phil Brown, who is a historian, Phil Brown. He is houses the Catskills Institute out of Brown University. So if you go to Brown University's library, there is a repository on that library, and you can submit things to Phil. But honestly, if you have a treasure trove of gems, I'm happy to take them off of anyone's hands at any time. Like I said, there's a traveling exhibit that accompanies this book, and there are plans for it to continue touring around America. And I am a collector, as many photographers are. We are collectors, and I'm happy to have them on loan or find a way to get them to Phil. But I believe Phil is still collecting things for the website. I'm not sure where they're all housed, but they're all scanned and put on the website. And please don't throw anything away from the Catskills. And I will also say that there is a huge market on eBay for Catskills ephemera. So if you really want to get rid of it, I will buy it from you on eBay.
Well, thank you. I just occurred to me, and also, it was, I too am a photographer just as a hobby, really. And my son is a photographer, but beside that, I'm also, I've been in fashion and I love architecture. So it really touched on all of these aspects of my interest. And it was amazing to me to see how all these places were destroyed without actually. I know that there are companies that buy up the architecture, or at least pieces. I mean, are there companies that have gone in there and before they demolish them, to at least taken art, some of the architecture that you can find that they've sold? Or do you know anything about that? Because that's really interesting to me.
Yeah. So I think it's like, it depends on the circumstance. So for example, the Concord, when the Concord was sold, I was out in California then, so I wasn't home then, but I remember my dad telling me that the Concord had an auction, and they auctioned off to the public all the furniture and everything. And then later they turned it into a fireman's training camp before they demolished it, as you see in the photographs when I was able to come home and photograph it. Many people have gone in to take things, steal them, essentially. Others have gone in with permission. So there are a few people that were friends with the Grosinger family who have gone in there to take a lot of the lights and the fixtures. And there was a couple of summers ago a sale that this man named Albert had. Albert has a restaurant called Albert's in Liberty. You can look it up. He's probably you could find him. He has a ton of ephemera, and I believe even Sullivan County Community College has a lot of the old signs. When I was photographing, I'd often encounter people in the hotels, and I had encountered everything from people taking pieces of metal and wood to repurpose them in their own architectural projects to smaller projects and things, crafts and things that they were making to sell. And really the sad, tragic thing is so much of it was just left, discarded, almost apocalyptic, and no one ever went back. So the people that have gone back have done a lot of scavenging, and the scavenging has gone from taking the beautiful Sputnik lights that hung in Grossinger's that are like thousands of dollars for these mid-century lights, to literally pulling out the wiring and like the metal from the hotel. So they've been looted in every way that you can imagine. And that's why they really are these ruins. But for me, they were ruins that invited a lot of discovery and a lot of kind of learning about the past. And that record, having now looked at about the 50 sites that I documented, I'd say over half of them, there's not even a ruin left. So it just kind of, it's haunting to me. And I think, it just kind of, to me, it's like, okay, I'm really glad I made the book, because I felt compelled in this drive to make it that I couldn't always explain. And now to people that are always telling me there's nothing there, I just say, like, you're not looking, because there's so much there. There's so much story and memory and layer and past and present and everything going on. And, when I kind of drive by where there used to be a hotel and now there's these kind of like, ugly condos, I know that like the book is a document in itself of something that's just gone.
I'm always, wherever I grew up in Brooklyn. Now I've lived in Nashville 28 years, and I've watched Nashville, demolish these incredibly old structures that will never be able to be duplicated. And it just astounds me that they don't preserve the architecture in these hotels, just to preserve it and turn it into something else, but keep at least the architecture.
It's heartbreaking.
That's heartbreaking to me.
Yeah, I mean, this cover, this room should have been deemed a historic site by New York State. And there is really, like, we can blame everyone, right? Like, I think especially American Jews love to cry about the downfall of the Borscht Belt, but it's us all who abandoned it. And it takes a village, and it's really hard. Like a museum, where's the funding? what's going on in the county? Oh, they're going to put markers. There's so many things going on when you have a place that has this massive industry and then this massive fallout. I will say that, while trying to move on from the project in so many ways and working on another book, I still am invested in it because I still see that there's a lack of historic preservation. So I'm working with a benefactor, I'll call him, from the Jewish American Historical Project. His name is Jerry Klinger, and he has offered to work with me to put historical markers in Sullivan County.
Oh.
And I'm going to be living up there in the spring for personal reasons, and I'm hoping to get that started so that we could at least put, markers like you'd see along the side of a road, like here was Grossinger's, open from blah to blah, because that in itself is just, it's needed and it's necessary, and it's really quite shameful for such a prominent place of historic cultural importance to the Jewish community, to America, to New York State, really is just doesn't have the legacy, beyond the words, beyond the memories that it deserves.
Oh, I love that you're doing that. I thought we don't have much time. We're really a little out of time, but I wanted to just have one question that I wanted to just at least briefly ask you about the casinos. Like, how many were finished? How many remain? What's the story with the casino business there now? And do you know?
So I believe New York State just approved the opening of one casino, and it opened in, I think, February of 2018, I think. And the casino, was bringing in people and foot traffic, and it has restaurants, and they opened a water park. And obviously the pandemic closed down the casino for quite some time. There's one casino there, but there are many other hotels, Airbnbs, repurposed bungalow colonies, people that are coming in, building up new places, and really restoring the old. And, please don't think that my book is what it looks like today, because it truly isn't. It's what it looked like yesterday. And it's constantly changing up there. And although maybe it has a long way to go and it will never be what it was, because you can't recreate something that great, it will be again, and it is. And there are a lot of things, if you look up Sullivan County, so many places to go and stay. And I hope that, in time, it continues to be a place where people go and become that destination that it once was.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I can't thank you enough, because this was just really, it was really a straight to the heart Jewish experience, and with full of memories for me personally. And I really could, if I could speak for other people in our community, I'm sure it was as well. And so thank you so much. And we're excited to see your next book and stay in touch. And thank you again. And I don't even know what. Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, and to everyone